Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Resident Alien. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, we have Harry's first day on the job as the town doctor, and obviously, the kid Mark is his first patient, and it's like, literally immediately tries to start to kill the kid, but the kid's like, no, still trying to tell, which this episode clarified. I was wondering whether Ben was just dating his mom, but it's like, no, they're married. So that is, Ben is Mark's dad, or at least they're assuming so. But having to calm him down about, like, obviously this whole alien thing, but also Harry, getting his other patients, which I love. I love at first he's kind of like, I was like the smartest one. Because I love the whole thing about, what was it, what he was saying in the code opening was basically like humans, it's like, every species is different or whatever. And he's like, my species is super smart. Humans aren't. They think their leading cause of death is heart disease. It's not. It's almond milk. But also, like, he's like, I was like the doctor on my world, so I can handle this just like 5 minutes and I'll basically have it all figured out. And it's like, wait, you're not a 12-year-old boy with the wart. She's like, not the 12-year-old boy, but the wart angle. And so having to examine that woman down there. And I love him he was trying to turn on his camera. His light, but he actually took a picture. She's like, are you taking a picture? He's like, yes, a selfie. This is my first day on the job. And she's like, oh, okay. And gave the peace sign. It's just like, also, I love that he was examining that late. It's like, she found a lump, so be delicate. And he was like, all right, just because you found a lump, self-examination is good because once you've done that and, we've taken notice of it, that means there's a good chance we'll find things early enough. So it's like, oh, cool. And it's like, yeah, so let's see that tit. And he's like, I didn't find out that tit wasn't the appropriate word to say when you're referring to a breast. I also like that thing with the whole situation with the little girl. Is like, yeah, if you're not careful, your parents don't have insurance, so if you're not careful, you're going to basically, your parents, if you get hurt like this, your parents are going to live on the street. And the little girl's like, and then like Harry just gives her a little lollipop or whatever, and I'm like, I love Harry. Even later on, there's that doctor who is like, you keep eating like this, you're going to die. That old man, he was like, he doesn't really like doctors too much. Because Sam told him what he couldn't eat, and Harry's like, there's like 10 things here that will kill you. He's like, how long do I have, Doc? He's like, do you enjoy Christmas? He's like, yeah, celebrate it before June. He's like, but till then? It's like, yeah, eat whatever you want. He's like, I actually like this doc, a doc that kind of tells me how it is. And, Asta was like, that's interesting. He doesn't like any doctors at all. So Harry is, in his own weird way, helping out. One of my other favorite scenes is Ben going to his office, and it's like, Mark is like, you want to know who the murderer is? It's obviously Harry. He's an alien, like an alien, and then you have Big Black being like, you know what? I could have you arrested for wasting a cop's time. Blah blah blah. Do you have HBO? I want you to go home and I want you to watch season 1 of Oz and then decide whether or not you want to go to jail or not. Which I was like, yo, to anyone that's unaware, Oz is like a hardcore jail show. I think it came out in like the early 2000s. I barely remember the show because I think I watched a fragment of an episode, but it's like some hard, it's not like, haha fun, and it's like, no, like, I think it kept it pretty damn real about the shit that goes down in jail. And it's like, from the vague memory I have of it, it was like, I remember, because I was probably still fairly young at the time, I was like, that's some hardcore shit. I was like, for you to tell some little kid, go watch this hardcore show about jail, and it's like, Jesus, Mike, you're super extreme. Even Liv being like, he's kind of a teddy bear on the inside with some anger issues. But she was actually willing to listen to Mike, and it's like, hey, maybe, and she actually kind of nailed it by being like, well, if you're the only one that can see it, maybe he's got a protection field that makes it so the rest of us can't see it, but because you're special, you can see it. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, all right, I'm going to draw it out and you tell me. He's like, yeah, because that way we can post it out there and other people can know what's going down. So obviously, this just makes Harry want to kill the kid that much more. I even love later on, after hearing after hearing Darcy's story, like he thinks about trying to create a situation where there's an accident, and I love like the scenario he created, and it's like, oh, I'm happy. It's to his wife being like, oh, I'm happy to be home with my husband and son in my home, and it's like, yeah, I mean these cookies are delicious, just so stilted because obviously that's what he thinks like human conversations are like, and it's like, oh. It's like, oh, that sound and this smell of gas, lights up a cigar and explodes. I also love his thing. It's just, for whatever reason, a random shoe flying off. The random shoe lands in the snow after the house explodes. When a piano drops on Mark, his shoe lands. I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense, but it's just like, it's part of your plan and everything. And he's so giddy about it, too. He's just like, oh, I'm so smart. I'm so amazing. I also love, like, for him being like, he's not really, the only thing he needs is food. And when he got there, I was like, oh, did you eat something, or rather someone? And he saw the cow and everything, which I was like, oh, is that supposed to be like a wink and nod? Because obviously, like, aliens, crop circles, abducting people, cows, like, I wondered if it was something like that. I was like, oh, you're going to eat that cow? No, he's sucking on its udder. And I even love he comes back later on and he was like, I'm sorry, it was all consensual. I also like this episode showcased that, we got a little hint at him doing his thing of like trying to be human, but we got even more of a look at it because he's like, yeah, he doesn't want it. He could just easily get a new appearance, but he's like, it took him so long to get used to this body that he's not about to go through that all again. So we saw like the hassle of him learning how to just be human and do, human things and how long that took. So, I did like him and Darcy going out because it's the whole, it's like the whole thing of him being like, oh yeah, like, last time I got drunk, I tried to kill someone, and she's just kind of going along with it because she thinks he's kind of joking, and it's just him going, ha 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 ha, making that face and everything, and it kind of honestly hit it off. I love that guy walks up, he's like, hey, she's like, we don't have Wi-Fi here. He's like, no, I was asking for a napkin. Oh, Lowen, look at you over here asking for a napkin. She's like, just go away. I was like, poor bastard, she's asking for a damn napkin. And she's like, shoo, I'm like hitting on Harry, get away from me. But it's like they go on a date, bowling and all that. So I just thought that was, and it was kind of nice. It's interesting because immediately, like my brain immediately kind of like, I kind of already shipped, Asta and Harry, but then like him and Darcy, and it's just like, he doesn't quite get the situation, but they go bowling, and lo and behold, who's there? Big Black. And it's like, oh yeah, like certain days I come here, I own this spot. So he's bowling, he's doing the moves, the shimmy back and forth, and then strike. Darcy does the thing, strike. I love Harry being like, yeah, calculating this, I got this, and it ends up hitting him in the balls with the bowling ball. So poor bastard. But like I did like that we did get to learn a little bit more about Darcy, like her dream of like God, what was it? Like, was it, I think it was skiing. It wasn't snowboarding. I think it was skiing, but, her, like, she had an accident. Like, she was actually, it seems like she was pretty good going to go, in this, like, very essential pro level, but then, like, her, like, during one of the things, she ended up messing up her leg. She ended up saying like, oh, she could have lost her leg, which is interesting because I have a very similar surgery scar because I fractured my ankle. The most stupidest thing. I don't know if I'm sure it's still on YouTube. I actually did a video where I talked about it a little bit. It's one of my most epic fails in life, but I had a very similar scar on the same leg. It's actually kind of sad later on when we kind of see like Darcy kind of on her own because it doesn't seem like but I did like the back and forth she had with her friend. It's like, hey, Harry's like, do I know? She's like, yeah, you had your hand up me. And it's like, whoa, calm down. Like which one? Because I kept saying, basically implying like, oh, like the whole whore and slut thing they have going back and forth, and it's to me. I'm not really envious, but I've come across that before, like, in real life, like, it's like, like girls have that relationship where it's like, bitch, oh, you really talking like that, bitch? Like they can say that and just, they can mean it in like a friendly way, but you can't, it's just that it's such a unique thing that I feel like girls can have. I mean, just like dudes have their talk too, but it's like, it's such a unique thing, but they're calling each other a slut and whore. It's like, oh yeah, like, essentially, there were references because even later on, it's like, oh, look at you alone with a hot dog. It's like, oh, you want both of these because you need one for each hand, just like in the past. Oh, shut up. Do you want a bowl? Yeah, sure. It's like they had that relationship, but it's actually kind of cool. Like I said, I think that's such a neat dynamic. Like I feel like that's very unique to ladies. I think that's so fascinating. But I like that. But it seems like it's kind of like. outside of that, like Darcy might not have a lot, especially because it seemed like her dreams and everything kind of came crashing down the moment she got hurt. So probably kind of, leaves you feeling a little empty, which obviously that's a big thing this episode. A lot of people feeling empty. Initially, Harry's thinking about it just being like, oh, I'm hungry, but it's like, no, I'm not really hungry. And he's talking to Ben, and Ben's talking about, he thinks about being a kid from time to time. And, because he's getting this pit, something, Harry's like, what? Granted, Sam's wife interrupts, and he's just like, no, come on. Ben was literally in the middle of explaining that he's a man baby. And he's like, I did not say that. Because Harry was hoping that if he could figure out what Ben's whole pit in his stomach was about, maybe he could figure it out about himself. But he could also see through things. He could see that Astra is sad, but it's manifesting as anger, just because that's her way of dealing with it. Big Black being, weak, but trying to pretend to be, imposing, and that he's far superior, and then gets to Liv, and Liv is like, she's like a rabbit who's had all her hair, who's been yelled at so much that basically their hair falls out. And it's like I brought up last episode, she's so meekish and just very like, yeah, okay. Like the contrast between her personality and Big Black's, that's just an interesting dynamic that they have going on. You could definitely tell, obviously, Asta was really hurting because, like, when Sam's wife showed up to pull stuff out of his office, it was like, no, you don't do that. It's evidence and stuff like that. You could tell she was making excuses because Harry's office wasn't that office. It was a different office. But it's like she wanted everything because changing anything would just solidify that Sam's going in. It's like if you keep everything like it is, then, it's like he's still alive to a certain extent. So you could tell, like, that was the main reason why she wanted to keep stuff around. But I also love that Harry's like, oh, he ate the chicken wings. And he was like, while they're kind of going back and forth, he's like, I wonder, can I sneak in there and just grab the wings from them? Another aspect to this episode is the dynamic between Harry and Mark. I love him calling and pretending to be, oh, I'm a kid from your school. I saw the alien. He was handsome and he left. Really? Yeah. It's like, actually, I work at the post office or something like that. And it's like, why do you sound like a kid instead of an adult? And I forgot what he was saying, but it's like, well, then how much does a stamp cost? $100? No, and the stamp costs $30, stupid. He's like, don't call me stupid. I love that. Then, he tried to cut the brakes on the bike. Didn't end up the way he thought it would. He's like, wait, just some stitches? That's it? And then the back and forth where he's seeing Harry for who he really is. And he's kind of, at first he's bashful about it. He's trying to look away from him, a little scared. But he stands up to Harry. He's like, nah. He's like, go ahead. And he's like, oh, this is going to be, giving him the stitches and stuff like that. He's like, is there a mosquito in here? Because it felt like such a tiny little bite. And it's just like, it's like, are you going, be a good boy? He's like, yeah. And he mouths the words. He's like, no, I'm not going to be a good boy. It's just like, this is the rivalry we always wanted. I love this. An alien versus some snot-nosed brat. I love it. So that's definitely going to be an interesting thing, especially because, like, he's no longer afraid of Harry. He's just like, no matter what, I've got my eyes on you. I'm ready for this. He's like, also, your shoes are untied. And Harry looks down. He's like, hi, made you look. And then Harry unties his shoe. He's like, see, it was actually untied. Ha! The small victories, right? We also got introduced to Asta's dad this episode. And I love that it's being like, oh, like, you have all these bad feelings about, oh, the guys I bring around. It's like, no. It's like, for that guy, I don't feel anything. Which is ironic because I think Harry is starting to, like, I think in the beginning, sure, but Harry is starting to feel more as it goes on. Like, he talks about once again, like, humans and their emotions, making them weak. But now it's like he's starting to kind of, because even later on, he picks up on Asta. He's like, I'm playing cards because Asta wants to. He's like, because at first he was like, it doesn't make any sense. How can I feel what another person's feeling? Obviously that being empathy. And it's like, oh, you felt superior to humans, but just in a short amount of time, you've kind of grown attachments to them and you have grown empathetic. Like, maybe because his species has always looked upon others as beneath them, and now being amongst them and getting to know them, being around them enough, kind of, very Grinch-like. I mean, the whole green thing, it's very befitting for him to kind of be his heart's going 3 sizes that day or something like that. I think that's such a fascinating thing. But we did kind of see, what kind of relationship Asta and Sam had. Because for her, she ends up bringing up the fact is Dan isn't actually her biological dad. Her mom bailed on her when she was young, left her, and Dan took her in. But ever since, she never really felt like she fit in until Sam made her kind of feel a little at home. And, because even Asta was bringing it up earlier, like that Harry is like, oh yeah, don't really know too much about you, and he kind of avoided the subject, but he kind of eventually hits him later on because he realizes, like, it hard cuts to everybody, Asta, Mark, as well as Darcy, about the whole being lonely thing, having someone be there to look out for you, but being lonely, him missing his home, that's what kind of really hit him. And so obviously he ultimately ends up finding like a piece to his, I think it's like a part to like the whole device, and he ends up using it later on where he like drops the apple on top of it and is levitating because, like, I guess it messes with the gravitational pull. Maybe that's kind of how it's going to work on the planet. But I thought that was so interesting coming full circle, because it's like we got that whole thing with that dude and he fell and was left levitating and asking for help. I was like, oh, so now we've kind of brought that full circle, so that wherever that is, that's connected to your device. And we see it later on, he was basically floating here for the past 3 months. We also see like 2 birds had gotten caught in the gravitational pull and they were stuck there too, and all of them like froze and died. Also, we see people have come across it. So now this is going to make some interesting headway storyline wise. I should also note, one of the people is one of the dudes from Stony Prep in Riverdale, which obviously Riverdale airs Wednesday nights as well. So I just thought that was interesting. I was like, hey, that's neat. So that was just an interesting development in its own right. But Asta feeling like she kind of failed Sam because she was like, oh, I wasn't here for him, I should have stayed. But it's like, he was poisoned, there's nothing you could have done. She's like, maybe I could have. But Harry offering to play cards with her, and she's like, he's like, let me put my stuff down in my office. It's like, this is your office, It's her kind of finally letting go, it's like she can't hold on to Sam forever. Especially because her dad was saying, like, do the thing of like, burning her clothes, because if you don't, like, Sam's spirit will never be able to fully rest. He'll be kind of lingering here on Earth. Also, like, cutting part of her hair, and I think it's kind of like a spiritual ritual. So I thought it was interesting because she even talked about it, that she does have, I'm sure, like, her situation is kind of why, but she had talked about the fact that she had kind of moved out because she had not the best relationship with her dad. Considering her circumstances, it makes sense. I think for him, he wasn't necessarily ready to be a dad at the time, and she had the very complicated family situation. But at the end of the day, it's like, she's saying, like, I'm not 16 anymore, but the meals every day wouldn't be too bad. It's kind of a nice little peek into their relationship. I'd like to hopefully we get to see more. But yeah, I'm curious who the people are at the very end who found Harry's device, and what they're gonna do. Maybe they make a big stink of it, like, oh my god, scientific discovery found this, which Harry's gonna be flipping out because obviously Mark's gonna be like, oh, that must be an alien device. I know who the alien is, and Harry's gonna be like, what? No. I was kind of under the impression that I'm basing this on the trailer. I think the trailer hints that there was like a serial killer, but so far there's only been one murder, but maybe there's going to be other murders to cover, or maybe it's just like, hey, this person goes on a spree. I'd assume whatever future murders potentially might take place, maybe it's just Sam's death, but I think there's other murders as well, but I could be mistaken. I thought based on the trailer there were others, but I could be wrong. My immediate thought right now is like, I think it might be Darcy. I don't know, it's just like, just Darcy's interactions with Harry makes me feel like she might be kind of like, it's kind of like she put on like this kind of like happy disposition, even though she said some of the things that she says, that I think maybe someone who kind of doesn't have a lot to, like, I don't know, maybe there's a deeper reason why she potentially killed Sam. Maybe there's something with that. Maybe it ties into that whole loneliness thing. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just randomly throwing that out there because I assume it'd have to be someone we're going to get to know over the course of the show. I doubt it's going to just be some random person, so I'd assume it's among the group. So my money is on Darcy. We'll have to wait and see how that ends up ultimately playing out, though. So I just don't know how to really like explain like why I just get this feeling. It's just like there's something in my core that's just like I just get this feeling from Darcy, like it's all just kind of like to mask what's really there, that maybe when you see that side of her that's kind of sad and lonely, like she is kind of looking for someone because she I mean, because Asta made the whole conversation about feeling off, but maybe the same thing about Darcy. Like, maybe there's just something kind of off about her, and because of that, her entire life, people have just kind of kept their distance from her. So maybe, much like Harry trying to play the role of like a normal human, maybe Darcy's kind of trying to do the same thing too, but she's kind of got that same void in Harry as a certain regard. Which, I mean, I think that might be the irony behind where this story is potentially going to go, is that Harry is going to end up being more human than the person who's doing all these killings, because they're missing something inside of them, and ironically, an alien is more human than them. I think that might be the trajectory the story goes. Like I said, randomly throwing it out there to be Darcy. In episode 2, I'm throwing that out there. We'll ultimately see, where this all takes us going forward from here. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.